Hello, I'm Rosalind Palmer and welcome to another episode of Monkey Business, the podcast for business people and people everywhere that really delves into your monkey mind, that monkey chatter, that chatter on your shoulder, which is really all about your mindset. And the aim of the podcast is to really understand the mindsets of the kings and queens of their own particular jungles who've maybe tamed those monkey minds for success or come back from adversity and failure and really come through. So very much like Stephen Covey has the 7 habits of highly successful people, we're delving behind the habits into the mindset. And what better guest today? I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Chris Cook. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much. I'm excited about this one.
I am too. And I'm just going to introduce you very briefly. Chris is a speaker, a business coach, and a mentor, but specifically a mentor for young athletes because he has a 10-year fantastic career and highly successful career as a GB swimmer athlete behind him. I'm just reading here so I get it right, Chris. Former double Olympian and former Commonwealth Champion. Is that correct?
That's correct. It sounds quite good, that, doesn't it? Sounds brilliant.
I'm very impressed. I'm also, what I'm really aiming to get in our conversation today, and I feel we've had a quick chat before we press the live button, and I always feel I already know you, is I'm very interested in that 10 years in a very, very high pressurized performance sport and how you got to the top, stayed at the top, what really that meant to you. And then that changed because you've had just over 10 years as a mentor, a speaker, a coach. So how you were able to take probably the best of your learning and the best of what you were doing into this new world. So let's back up maybe to the Olympic career. How did you really get into that? How did you manage to be a boy who was really good at swimming, no doubt, at school, and move from that into being a double Olympian?
Well, it's really interesting you say that. Like, people assume that I was a kind of child protege, that I was fantastic at swimming, and actually it was the exact opposite. I always joke with people that I was the 5th fastest swimmer in my club of my age group in South Shields, but there was only 5 kids in my age group in the club. But there's a little bit of truth in that, in the sense that whilst it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, there was no God-given talent there. There wasn't somebody came along and went, wow, he's phenomenal, let's draft him in, let's get him signed up. And there was certainly no beam of light came down from with the voice of God and delivered a tracksuit at the door. There was just some real pivotal turning points. One was making a start. I say that to all my clients, let's stop bumping our gums and talking about it and just make a start. And when we make a start, we start getting evidence. When we get evidence, we build confidence, we get information. And yeah, that's what it started. It started watching Adrian Morehouse, who won a gold medal at the Seoul Olympic Games. I watched him do it on TV and thought, I could have a go at that. And then joined a swimming club, and before I knew it, I found a passion. But I think more to the point was I found something that really fit with me. I'm an introvert. I like to be on my own a lot. So lockdown's played into my hands, if I'm honest with you. But I also enjoy the extroverted side, and I enjoy being around a crowd, but I have to be careful how much I have of that. So swimming for me was great. Head down, just go, and yeah, to make that transition to an Olympian was a long time, from the age of 9 till I was 25.
And
long time.
did something, again, you talk about pivotal moments, and sometimes it's luck. I don't know if you had a fantastic coach or mentor who took you on that path. Did something happen, an aha moment maybe in your mind that made you realize I could do this, I could really go for the top during those years?
Yeah, there was some key pivotal people in my life. Ken Nesworthy was my first coach. He was a parent sat in poolside at one time with a newspaper and got dragged into coaching it, but he absolutely loved it, and he came with a very different outlook. He wasn't from a swimming background, and I think there's so much benefit to those cross-industry mindsets and bringing something new and fresh in. And he really challenged things from a young age, and he would never let me off the hook. If you said you were going to do something, you did it.
Mm.
And then we'd talk about it afterwards. If you didn't do it, then there was a conversation that we had around, well, what's in the way? And you had that from the age of 12 upwards. It's such an impressionable age of your life. And this is where I believe, as corny as it sounds, sport can change people's lives, change mine. And I see it change the lives of young people all around the country on a regular basis. But yeah, there was a few key pivotal points. The main one was when I returned from the Olympics. I returned from the 2004 Olympics. I'd made the Olympics and I was doing really well in the world rankings. I was in the top 10 in the world. And I really was at a stage where it was unusual to be asking these questions, but I was asking, what more can we do? I was constantly asking, what more, what more, what more? And the problem with that question is you get the answer and you end up adding more to your job list.
Yeah.
And actually what I needed to do, I needed to really look at the stop doing list, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
And
I'm a big fan of the stop doing list.
Me too. And it was a comment from my sports psychologist one day when I was really stressed. He's called Simon Hartley, and we speak on a circuit together sometimes. And he said, you know, you look really stressed. And I said, I am. I've got all these things going on. I've got, now I'm in the top 10 in the world. I've got to report to different people. I've got different stakeholders to keep happy and all of this. And he said, wow, that's a lot for somebody who just has to swim 2 lengths of the pool as fast as they can. And I was like, are you kidding me or what? And actually what he triggered me like crazy then. I was really upset. And my ego was on full overdrive. And to cut a long story short, we started to explore the 2 lengths, the power of keeping it simple. And that was a real key pivotal point. And the questions we asked off the back of that was, is what I'm doing right here, right now, helping me swim 2 lengths? Yes or no? No grey fluffiness. Yes or no? If the answer was no, it got the boot. If it was yes, it got to stay in. But it really challenged normal beliefs, what we've always done. Things came up like, well, we've always done it this way. Well, I'm in the top 10 in the world, so why should I question it now? And other things came up like, well, everybody else does it this way. But that wasn't answering the question. The question was, is it helping you swim 2 lengths? No, then don't do it.
I love that. I mean, already I've heard so many, I can see why you're a great mentor and coach and speaker as well, because I'm hearing, I'm literally going, tick. The last words of my book are JFDI, which is just bleep, do it. And I agree with you about when I ran my PR business back in the 90s. It was the time when people were madly diversifying. You know, diversification in the 90s was the flavor of the week. And I just kept being really good at PR, really good. And I used to call it sticking to the knitting. I think that's probably a Yorkshire phrase. I must have got it from my grandma. But you know, it's about I'm going to stick with what I'm good at, and that wasn't because I lacked ambition or imagination, but I suppose that was my equivalent of the 2 lengths. Really, let's stick with the 2 lengths. So, what during that time was your biggest challenge? Really,
there was a few big challenges. The main one was ensuring that I identified my own personal blind spots. You know, we tend to go about things using the best tools we've got. We tend not to delve into the toolkit to use the ones that we're not good at. And if you want to be world class at something, you know, and I say to people all the time, in order to find your 2 lengths, and I challenge businesses all the time on stage, in small groups, in coaching sessions, you need to know your stuff better than anyone else. You need to really, in order to simplify, you need to really, really know it. In order to know it, you have to almost put the 10,000 hour theory of becoming an expert in something. All right, you can challenge some of that stuff, but there's something you can really hang your hat on there. And that is about practice, and polishing it up and understanding where it fits in life. So for me, that the big challenge was understanding what parts of my personality need to be challenged here. And a huge part of it was emotional resilience. I realized that my first reaction to most things was quite explosive. It was quite cutting. I would carry things around a lot. So comments or bad performances, I would carry them around, really carry them. And they were the things that were starting to get in the way. So the two lengths helped me start to focus on, hang on a second, if that's not helping me, and I hold that up against the two lengths, is this emotional resilience helping me? No, it's not. Then we need something to change, and
Change it.
been brave enough to face it.
Yeah, well, identify it. I'm wearing my therapist hat now.
Yeah.
Own it, identify
Yeah.
it, work out what it's not doing for you and the damage it's probably doing for you, and then deal with it. So
Yeah.
how did you deal with that, emotional resilience, but also those maybe kickbacks, those blocks?
Well, I follow a very simple three-step rule with my coaching. The first one is ask the question. Good quality questions derive good quality answers. Then you've got to answer it. So it's the power of the 3 A's. This is ask, answer, and then the last one's action. Keep it really simple. And the gap between answering and action is often where people get a little bit wobbly, a bit like, oh, I've said it, I'm going to have to do it now.
Yeah.
That's the bit that actually, in getting out there, it's about identifying those opportunities to stress test it. So, for example, we went on this crazy hunt of places where I could race that weren't as glitzy and glamorous as the Olympics. So we actively went in search of them. We looked at pools around the world and competitions that were around the world that were hard to get to. So I'd have to travel days and get there quite remote. But when I got there, I had to perform like it was the Olympics. And that 2 years beforehand, I would never ever have taken on that challenge. I would never have gone it alone and traveled out there by myself. I would never have identified those opportunities. I'd have gone, that's not good for me. I'll never perform that level. And yeah, we started then to look to stress test resilience, because I'm a big believer that resilience is an experience we have to move through in order to, we almost have to experience being broken before we fix it again in that respect.
Well, you're talking to the poster girl for resilience here. So we were talking about Clubhouse earlier, and we won't digress now, but I've regularly been a guest speaker within the resilience room, because very early I think people picked up on Clubhouse that A, I have a story to tell,
Yeah.
and B, it's really coming through all of that adversity that has given me resilience. And I studied it last year, actually. I do a lot of talks on it myself. So some people have a higher set point, not very many. Some people are naturally born with a slightly higher resilience set point. Most people learn through experience and adversity and come through. But obviously your mindset in getting you through, in keeping you going, in sticking to the knitting, that's all key. Where do you think your, let's call it your focused, resilient mindset came from? Is that part of your childhood, your upbringing? What do you attribute it to?
That's a really good question, and one I probably don't have a clear, straight answer on. I think the people I met, the journeys I went on, and the risks I took were all part of forming me, and being willing not only to start again, but to also, every time you start again, you don't start from the same initial first starting point. You start from a wiser, more experienced. And I think the one thing that's always thread through me is this understanding that you take you everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you take you everywhere, the trade-off on any journey, if you see it as a chapter in your book, and that is you then start the process of, hang on a second, I'm going to go and sort that alarm out. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah.
Can you pause that?
No worries, I'll pause it. Give me 1 second.
Go back on that. Good. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. There's no straight answer on that. I definitely think the people I met, the journeys I went on, and the risks I took were key pivotal things in the whole process, because the people that you meet, you can learn so much from. The journeys that you go on are almost like chapters in your book, if you were writing a book. And the coupled with the fact that you get to take you everywhere. And I truly believe that whenever we go through an experience, we're almost creating a new blueprint, a new opportunity to go, hang on a second, I can mold and adapt my skills to this. But often I find as though there's a little bit of resistance to change. There's a resistance within each of us to change. But then when you consider that life is about change, I mean, the cells in our body have changed since we've been on this call. You know, the very essence of life is about change, but we resist it because we want certainty. We like to know that we've got a future in something if we go into it, and all these things going on. But if we just accept that actually we're just here to be a little bit better than we were yesterday in all different areas of our life, there's some opportunities can open up there, definitely.
The trouble is, there's a lot of dichotomy within us as human beings, as you know. The need for certainty is absolutely one of our primeval instincts. You know, our limbic amygdala, our caveman part of our brain is certainty equals safety. But then we also seek variety. I remember Tony Robbins in the 90s talking about, he used the example of somebody who joined a gang, and in the 90s New York was not what it is today. You know, it was not a safe place to be. And I think Nancy Reagan at the time was doing this just say no, you know, to drugs. And Tony Robbins, I remember hearing him saying, what absolute, you know, bunkum. Why would they say no? Because here's what they're saying yes to. And then he went through kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but so many of them are contradictory. So he was saying, you know, I've joined a gang. I get certainty because I'm part of the gang and I know, you know, what the rules are and the rituals. I get uncertainty. Today, a mugging, you know, tomorrow. And we went through the whole, effectively the dilemma of those two sides that we all have. So wanting to know about you taming your monkey mind or that chimp mind, how did you get through those dilemmas that turned up in you? Because you took you everywhere you went, regardless of where it was. How did you get there to that Olympic pool?
I realised that if I really wanted something, then in order to get it, I would have to adapt and change. That was the first realisation, that the person I was when I wanted it at the start wasn't the person who was going to get it.
Yeah.
So almost looking at, here's the challenge, but here's the character. You know, the challenge is higher than the character because by definition it's a challenge. If it wasn't, then it would be a walk in the park. It would be the way around. So the challenge is up here and the character's down here. So there's two things going on there. What am I working on to meet the demands of the challenge, but also what characteristics meet the demands of the challenge? And when I looked at other Olympians and I looked how they operated and I observed them, I wasn't that. And that didn't put me off. That excited me that actually in the next 4 years, I've now got a role model to work towards, or even just a loose outline of the person I need to be. And I think that's key, you know, and I think a lot of people don't do that in business. They see that promotion, but they don't see the character that needs to.
I think that's really true. And having this podcast's a joy as well, because I get to talk exactly about this topic with people. But quite a few of the people are people that I've actually met and worked with in real life, shall we say, you know, and also my former PR and marketing career. And you're right, because when I was stuck or having a bad day or that monkey chatter was there, I'd think to myself, what would so-and-so do?
Exactly.
How would they turn up today? What would they do first? What would their outcome of the day be? And I realized that's got me through so many difficult situations.
It's so true. And I think what a lot of people tend to do is, and I'm going to contradict myself in many respects, but I'll come back on it, is there is that element of be a little bit better than I was yesterday, but there's also ditching the stuff that's not serving you. So when we identify the person we need to be, we need to step into that person and be that. You know, I heard a phrase the other day, dress for the job you want, not the one you've got. And that fits perfectly with that for me, because that is about identifying who you need to be. And we need to practice that now. We need to practice that now, not when we get there. Oh, when I get there, I'll start doing that. No, do it now. Live, breathe, act, talk, think like it.
Yeah.
And we tend to bring it into our experience in an easier flow. People talk about the law of attraction, all of that, and I get all of that. And, you know, there may be that non-physical thing going on. I don't profess to know what it is, but I definitely feel like I can tap into it. But I tap into it by working on the inner stuff. It's the inward reflection, not outward. I
Yeah.
don't sit there going, where is it, looking around for it.
Yeah.
I look for the space inside and go, there's a space here I can really work on. Is it emotional resilience? That's going to be tough. But what I think often people do is they open that box to shine a torch in the dark space and go, no chance, shut the box, switch the light off.
Well, it feels like a very uncomfortable journey, doesn't it? And you're
Yeah.
right, it's one thing at a time. But I think you're right. I came through agency life in the 80s and the 90s with that mantra, progress to the level you want to be promoted to, behave
Yeah.
in the way that the next level up. And for me, probably the biggest learning of that 20 years of my life was that, because also as well, here's a girl who went to a comprehensive school, and my parents were great, but grocers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I'm suddenly in this London world, and it was like, what's their mindset? How would they
Yeah.
turn up for this? And a lot of it was self-learned because people weren't necessarily teaching this stuff. But in the Olympics, before I move on to your sort of second iteration and taking all these fantastic transferable skills into what you do today, and I'm not asking you to name names, but who or how did you see people getting it wrong?
I saw people walking out to the blocks and coming back home with a medal that didn't reflect their talent and their work ethic. And I would often watch races, and it wasn't what happened in the race, it's what happened before and after, the kind of the
Hmm.
behavior, the traits. I was very lucky. I got to share the call room with people like Michael Phelps for 10 years and watching how he operated. I mean, he's the greatest Olympian in my eyes. I know the arguments out there, but he's obviously up there with one of the greatest of all time ever. I mean, that is phenomenal. I got the chance to see him operate. My last race was the Olympic final with him 2 lanes away. We wanted the gold medal, obviously. They got it, the Americans, and we finished sixth. But I watched people like that and realized that what they were working on were very human things, not kind of superhuman. And whilst we can celebrate and talk about the talent of these athletes, and they do have talent, it's not that gets them there. It's one of the 5, 10, 15, 20 factors which gets them there, but it's not sitting at the top talent.
No.
Hard work's there, work ethic, being willing to look in the dark spaces and work on all the stuff that's going to get you there. And that's the key, is when I was picking people out, I was picking a comparison of me to them with what was missing. I was admiring what they were doing, but then I wasn't going on this Facebook, Twitter campaign of comparison. That's the wrong comparison. This was
No, I think you're talking about
gathering intelligence.
character, aren't you? You're
Yeah,
talking
that's
about
it.
character. You're talking
That's
about
it.
values and
Yeah.
character. So somebody like him, what stood out for you?
Just he never let anybody take his power.
Mm.
He kept his power, and he didn't do it in a way that he bullied the room, which really turned my head. Because that for me, I'm a very out of harmony person. I think about the room before I think about myself. That's kind of sometimes one of the things I've had to challenge and tackle over the last 10 years. Because that's got its downsides too. Whilst people warm to that kind of character because I'm very empathetic, also I have to dial up the inner harmony and ask, hang on a second, I need to top my own cup up here at some stage.
Yeah.
So I've had to work really hard on that. But it's not my default. My default is, how's the room doing? So with people like Michael Phelps, and there was another Japanese swimmer called Kosuke Kitajima who dominated my field, breaststroke, for 3 Olympics, sorry. And he was phenomenal, but he had the same character trait. He never let anybody steal his power. He had this kind of presence about him, very present here now. And I'll never forget, after watching him break a world record, and he won gold at the World Champs. I mean, there's no better meet than that. You get the gold record, world record, and the gold medal. And he was the last one out of the pool after the meet had finished, when the lights were turning off and the caretaker was sweeping the poolside. And we asked his coach, we said, what are you doing? He said, he felt like he messed up one of his turns. And I was just like, that alone, that one answer back is, I'm at the top of my game, just going to push it a little bit further. I mean, he could have been going out on a night out and having a good, let his hair down, and he's well entitled to it. But actually, it wasn't about that. And when I really reflect on the why, what was his journey, what was my journey, was being able to look back and say I did everything I could and I'm satisfied, that was what it came down to. And I feel really lucky that I get the chance to do that.
When did you, or what happens with somebody at the top of their game like you and like them, when you decide that's it, that's it? How does that happen?
That's it. I mean, I can only talk from personal experience. My experience was I didn't feel the same way about Olympic gold and needed to move on. I sat with it for a bit. I kind of knew I knew I'd reached my peak, and that's what I felt. I felt physically, mentally, and emotionally like I'd reached my peak. I couldn't envisage going on for another 4 years of what I'd just gone through and more. So, and I never felt like that before. So I started answering and asking some really tough questions. And when I decided to move on, I was probably better positioned than I'd ever been to go on to do something else. But I went through really, really, like, I would say 3 years of the most traumatic experience, yet nothing happened.
It must be a bit like a bereavement, really.
Yeah, it was exactly that.
You're cutting off, aren't you? You're cutting off from one iteration.
It was exactly that.
And you are, moving on to something else, and like a divorce or a bereavement, that takes some mourning sometimes.
It was a loss, and I think coupled with the fact that my ego was on full tilt at the time. I was a double Olympian, finished in an Olympic final, my last ever race. I had all these kind of one-liners that made people go, wow. And yet I was lost, lonely, didn't know where to go. But the thing that was really, really holding me back was I wasn't willing to start again. I wasn't willing,
because you felt go in at something because I put all this work in already.
Yeah, could I bypass the first 10 stages and get to stage 10?
Yes.
And actually now I get excited when I have to start again. So when we came back from COVID as a business, I've got 2 businesses. I've got a speaking business and a coaching business. But I've also got a learn to swim business that I head up. My wife runs it. She's a managing director. And we lost both businesses, or we lost all of our income from both businesses in the space of 2 days.
Yeah.
Coming back from that, ordinarily, I would have been petrified, worried. I'd have attached the fact that I'm going to lose my house and my kids are not going to get fed and all these crazy things to the story. Okay. But actually having gone through what I went through in the transition between sport and business, I feel as though I went through my rock bottom, and I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
And people talk about their rock bottom like it was a really traumatic thing. I talk about it and celebrate it because I go, look who I am now. Like, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that.
I'm the same. My book's called Reset because, I think there's that desire, please, could I just press the reset button? I think we've been feeling that about the world. And certainly I felt like it and had to do it many times in my life. And I was talking recently and I thought maybe it was my own fault because when I was in PR and things were going quite well, I used to have a sign at the side of my desk saying, I've learned so much from my mistakes, I think I'll make another.
Perfect.
And then also I asked for grace. I thought, what do I need as a character? I need more grace. And I didn't realize that to get grace, it meant I was going to be broken into pieces and have to put myself back together again. But there's a lovely poem, strong trees do not grow with ease. The stronger the wind, the stronger the trees.
Awesome.
I love that. And I say it to nearly all of my clients. And of course, it's not fun while you're going through it, though, is it?
Yeah, it's not. But then there's a phrase that I use or a question that I use, and it comes back to something simple. Do I want this experience to help me get bitter or better?
Oh, I like that. Bitter. Yeah.
Am I going to allow myself to get bitter? Because that's easy. That is easy. That is just keep running the story as hard as you can, get really angry, and add a bit more fury in, and your brain goes in search of that evidence. It goes in search of it, and it creates the victim and backs up the victim. And I am victim to my victim quite a bit, so I get it. But that's the one question I come back to: is do I have to swallow something here to get better? Or do I want to stay here and be bitter? Because I don't like this feeling, actually, if I'm honest with you.
I love that. I might have to steal it.
Permanently borrow it. Go for it.
Here's one you can permanently borrow back. So we are going to have a separate conversation about Clubhouse, but very early I went into a room where we were sharing, you know, some of our truths and some of our stories. And this American woman said, "I love it." She said, "You've turned your mess into a message." And I thought, I think that will be the title of my next book, turning my mess into a message. So,
yeah.
so
I like that.
When you went through this 3 years, this mourning, this change, this transition, what was your aha moment about turning all of those transferable skills into the coaching, into the mentoring, into the speaking? How did that come about?
Well, there was a couple of key pivotal moments. One was when I got up on stage and spoke at a conference, and I got approached by somebody who almost opened a door. You know those moments when you have that conversation with that one person who just says, "I get you, I get where you want to go, and I think I've got a roadmap for you." And it was just one of those sliding doors opportunities. I took it. I was in the right place at the right time, delivering the right message, and that opened the door for me to really put my stamp on my own mentoring program. It was only supposed to be 3 weeks at best. Turned out to be 6.5 years of work. It was just one of those that we kept pulling the thread and it kept going. And I got the chance to really influence and reach out to tens of thousands of young people on various different platforms, mostly in front of them. It was hard work. I probably haven't got the energy now to do it again, but I am so grateful for the chance. So I think what I'm really saying there is I kept banging the drum, and eventually other people joined the orchestra. But you know, we have to provide the world with evidence first. There's plenty of people you meet on your journey who go, "Not for me, thanks," or "No, thanks." But if you're not frightened of the word no, you'll ask for anything, you'll keep going. And that was the pivotal moment, was when somebody just went, "I get what you're doing, I get your message, and I feel it fits here." And I started to see where my impact could be. For those 3 years in between, I was experimenting. I was going with the mantra of experiments can't fail, they can't fail, they can't fail. And I kept playing that mantra that experiments just give you information back. That's all they do. They give you results. What you do with those results is what determines what happens off the back of the experiment. And that was those 3 years, but they're quite turbulent, if I'm honest.
And what was your biggest learning? Because obviously all those young people in the audience would have been your greatest teachers, I'm sure. What was your biggest learning about how you were able to maybe communicate, help, or influence the very ones who didn't want to let that message in?
Storytelling. We are pre-programmed for sitting around a campfire listening to stories.
Something I also say a lot.
Yeah, really, that's amazing.
Yes, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We are, and we like stories. You know, if I tell my story about winning 2 gold medals at the Commonwealth Games, and you hear somebody else tell my story to someone else and go, "Oh, I heard this guy bumping his gums about his gold medals, and he won 2 gold medals at the Olympics." And I'm sitting there thinking, I didn't win them at the Olympics, it was the Commonwealth Games. They don't remember the detail, they skew with the detail. But the one thing they will remember is what my granddad said when I was 9. They'll remember that bit. Because emotionally, I guess, for them, they've gone, "Well, I've got a grandparent, I know how that feels." And they've attached to the emotion of the story. And I noticed that. I watched crowds year on year, big crowds from children right up to adults, and just watched how they behaved after I'd said a word or a phrase or told a story. And it was very, very similar. It wasn't area dependent.
Emotional response.
Yeah, it was. And I also learned that when you're delivering a message, try and hit them when they're at their most emotive, whether they're laughing, whether they're kind of bought into the lump in the throat story. Hit them when they're at their least expecting, like a comedian would, with a serious message and an undertone. And yeah, that's what I learned. And very unlike me as an introvert.
What did your grandfather say to you when you were 9?
Dream big, start small, anything's possible. And it started my journey, and that became my mantra. And I think he said it as a throwaway comment to get us off talking about the subject, to be fair. But it stuck with us. It was one of those moments that I was just like, yeah, let's make a start and joined a swimming club, and everything opened out. Yeah.
Apart from having to, like so many people, having to pivot last year, because maybe the world you'd set up for success was suddenly not there anymore. What have been the biggest challenges in the last 10 years in this career you're in now?
My emotional response to things, or my, should I say, reaction. I split it up into two things: reaction versus response. So I'm a very emotive person, so if I get some bad news, boom, I go off on one, And my wife knows me so well enough now that she knows it's just either the chimp going crazy, or I'm just experiencing that anxiety gap between where I want to get to and where I am now. And we both know, I instinctively know now, that will settle, and then my logic brain kicks in. So I kind of, weirdly, I don't know if this is good or bad, but I do it and it works. I let my chimp go and I just let it go for it. That's been my biggest challenge. Before then, I used to suppress it. I used to feel guilty about it. So if he did have an outburst, I'd be like, oh my God, I best go around and tell everyone I'm really remorseful and patch it up. And now I don't do that as such. I go for it and I let that happen. And if I do have some explaining to do afterwards, I'll do that. I'll kind of fess up.
Let it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Years ago, I did some work with John Gray, the guy who wrote Men Are from Mars and Women from Venus.
Yeah.
And he said the difference between men and women, but I think what you're saying relates to both, is that women have to bottom out. So it's like when they're going, it's like they've got to go down the bottom of the well, down the bottom of the well. We're not quite there yet. I've hit the bottom of the well, I'm coming back up again. And he said, and men are like on a bit of elastic, that it's like, I'm off to the cave, I'm going deeper in the cave, I'm down the end of the cave, boing, I'm coming back again.
Yeah.
Either way, it really is about letting that out and seeing it through, which is what you're saying you found as a coping mechanism.
It is. I allow that reaction to happen. It's important for me to lift the lid on it and almost take the pressure cooker off, the pressure of that, and then allow the response to come through. And that, for me, COVID did that. I spent 3 weeks with my chimp going crazy, worrying. I remember picking my kids up when both businesses had kind of folded and collapsed. And I picked my kids up, and it was this real parallel life thing going on. They were celebrating the fact that school was out forever, and I was walking behind them going, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And
a lot of parents actually.
Yeah, but that's what I rested on in the next few weeks that followed. I allowed my response to be, I asked questions of, how do I want to behave? And the one line that I've got, and I've got it written on my wall in the office, is emerge stronger. That's my mantra. Is everything I do on a daily basis is about emerging stronger. And I've just hit my best sales month last month for speaking online. And I'll be honest, it's not my preferred choice, but I'm really enjoying it now.
You mentioned that actually in many ways, lockdowns played to some of your.
Yeah.
Me too, funnily enough. I mean, I'm a classic extroverted introvert. It took me a long time to work that out. Career in PR and all the rest of it. But, a degree in English literature, sitting in very dark, horrible rooms reading books for 3 years. This is not the degree of an extrovert. And I used to go away to a juice retreat, and on their wall they used to have in big letters, sometimes the best way to go forward is to retreat. And I think that is about that, just allowing it to happen. I literally could talk to you all day.
Oh, me too. Thank you.
I'm sure most people could listen to this all day. And I really want to ask you, what's the question I haven't asked you that you'd like to ask of yourself?
Oh, what's my current challenge?
Yeah, and what is that?
That is to be patient. I'm in a rush like everybody else. I've bought into society's norm, shall we say, because the pace of change is not going to let up. It's not going to get slower, but that doesn't mean to say we need to be in a rush internally. And I know that's my challenge. I'm in a newer field, not a new field. I'm in a newer field. I've got evidence that it's growing, and I just need to be patient and enjoy that. And there's moments when I enjoy it, and then there's moments where I find myself in the thick of trying to force it and push it. And that's my challenge, is to be patient.
Maybe you need sometimes the best way forward is to retreat on your walk.
Sounds
And
great.
I interviewed a very experienced broadcaster, Janie Lee Grace, and she said to me, a very good question is, what's the one question you wouldn't want me to ask? So what's the one question you wouldn't want me to ask, Chris?
Oh, I've no idea on that. I'd have to have a think about that one. That's a good one. Maybe
follow up.
Yeah, maybe where you're going to be in 10 years' time. And the answer to that would be, I have no idea, and that scares me.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably also true for most of us, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
We don't quite know where the world is going, so we're going to all have to strap in and enjoy the ride. So thank you.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed this many lengths here with you. It's been fantastic. I really appreciate your time and input. I've got a feeling our paths are going to cross.
Me too. Thank you.
In the future, I think we've got a lot of things in common, and you've really shared. And congratulations for the way you're mentoring young people, and you know, you're making such a difference in the world. So
oh, thank you very much. I've loved this. Genuinely loved it.
look, I've loved it too. So I've been in conversation today with Chris Cook, and I'm Rosalind Palmer, and this is Monkey Business.